Hi, my name is Kyle, and this is Ryan, and today we'll be talking to you about
the environmental impacts of the global soy complex. The global soy complex is a system built on the foundation of the industrial agriculture model. As we've explored in class, this form of agriculture has many detrimental impacts on the environment, and the growing of a soybean is no exception. One way to analyze the environmental impacts of the soybean and its resulting products is by conducting a life cycle assessment, which evaluates the impacts of a product's life cycle from the extraction of its raw materials to the disposal of the used good, or following it from cradle to grave. All soybean products start with a soybean seed. The top global soybean seed distributors are agribusiness giants DowDuPont, Syngenta, Limagrain, Monsanto, and Bayer, which recently bought out Monsanto. Where these companies actually get their seeds is a whole nother rabbit hole to dive into. But for now, we'll assume that the environmental impacts of acquiring these seeds is negligible in comparison to the rest of the soybean's life cycle. Next comes soybean cultivation. This stage of a soy product's life cycle has arguably the largest environmental impact. The use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers contaminates the soil, water, and air of a soybean farm, drastically degrading the health of the soil, contributing to agricultural runoff that causes eutrophication, increasing the risk of respiratory and neurological diseases for workers on the farm and surrounding populations, and posing a general threat to the surrounding wildlife. This stage also emits a fair amount of greenhouse gases due to the use of the industrialized machinery used to maintain the crops, requires massive amounts of irrigated water, with soybeans needing an average of 25 inches of water to grow, and contributes to the degradation of the environment due to the immense amount of land cleared out to grow the soybeans, but we'll talk more about that later. Next comes processing and distribution. Once the soybean is grown, it is processed into a number of different soy products. 85% of the soybeans produced in the world are processed into soybean meal and oil. 98% of that meal is processed into animal feed, and 95% of the oil is processed into edible oil. The environmental impacts of the processing phase primarily come from the greenhouse gas emissions emitted by the processing machinery used to create these varying soy products. These products are then distributed around the world, with the United States, Brazil, and Argentina being the top soy product exporters, and China and India being the top importers. The international air travel of these soy goods requires immense amounts of fossil fuels, contributing to the amounts of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Finally, we have consumption and disposal. As we brought up earlier, most of the soybeans that are grown are used to feed the livestock industry, which has its own terrible impact on the environment, while the remaining soybeans make their way into a variety of other products that we eventually consume. And depending on what soy product we follow, and depending on how it's disposed of, the environmental impacts will vary. Soy fact.
In ancient China, soybeans were seen as a food primarily for the poor, so it was a common insult to tell somebody to go suck soybeans.
Soy fact.
In the 1940s, Henry Ford made a car completely out of soy.
Soy fact.
In 2015, the number one export from the United States to China was airplanes. The number two export was soybeans.
Another way to consider the environmental impacts of the global soy complex is by analyzing the ecological footprint of soybean production and consumption. An ecological footprint is a way to measure the amount of land needed to produce everything a given population consumes. Traditionally, it's used in the context of individual people or entire countries, but we'll apply the concept to the global soy complex. Roughly 38% of the Earth's arable land is used for agriculture, with 11% being dedicated to crop cultivation. Of that 11%, 298 million acres of land are used for soybean production. A lot of this land has been cleared out through the deforestation of forests around the world, like the Amazon rainforest in Brazil and the Chaco forest in Argentina. In fact, since 1970, an estimated 190 million acres of the Amazon rainforest has been lost. How much of this loss can be attributed to soybean production is difficult to quantify, but the effects of soybean production on deforestation is undeniable. This loss of massive amounts of forest also greatly increases the carbon footprint of soybean production. Because forests function as carbon sinks, clearing out these ecosystems drastically reduces the amount of carbon dioxide the planet is able to reabsorb. After putting this data, with some rough estimates, through the Ecological Footprint calculator, the footprint of the global soy complex comes out to be 21.4 global hectares. In other words, the global soy complex uses 12.6 Earth's worth of resources in a given year, meaning that this complex will have used all of the natural resources the planet is able to produce in a year by January 30th. Once again, this is a tool meant for actual populations, not an international market complex, but the environmental implications are still stark. No matter which way you choose to analyze the environmental impacts of the global soy complex, the immense stress this system puts on the environment is striking. From the clearing out of vast swaths of forests to the application of hundreds of thousands of tons of chemical pesticides and fertilizers, it is clear that something, many things, must change before the global soy complex can be seen as an environmentally sustainable system. Thanks for watching.